I want to start my introduction or something, if the hook is important to as literature thing or practical thing?
It's not the most significant point. The hook actually comes naturally to most people. It's not something that you should study to learn how to do. It's something, all of you have a natural hook already. You know, when we did the thing on the apps, the software, you all naturally, you enter the topic in a certain way. That's the hook, right? So I wouldn't worry so much about that. The hook is more like a creative technique, but it's like our voices are something that come very naturally to us. So it's not anything that you really have to teach people. In fact, when you guys wrote that first recommendation, I was trying to work with your voices, with your style to address your specific issues. Okay. So, you know, the one time when like the hook, when you have time to think about it, where it can become useful is, for instance, when you're coming up with things like titles, right, or subtitles. What's going to be the most useful title for something? And that's something that you should do at the end after you've got everything else in place. I say that, but of course there's always exceptions. Depending on the kind of writer you are, you're the kind of writer that maybe a line comes to you, or a title, or an idea, or a word comes to you, and from there all of a sudden, boom, you're off. And all of a sudden you have an introduction, or you should pay attention to the kind of writer you are too. Are you the kind of writer, I think we have a nice mix of people here. Are you the kind of writer that's pretty linear, that begins writing like beginning, middle, and end? And you just like draft that way. And then, you know, when you revise, you've already got that, you know, linear progression. You could be that kind of writer. I see this in a lot of my students. A lot of my students are, you know, people that begin in the middle. They don't quite know what they want to write about, so they start writing the middle. And then they figure out as they're writing the middle, oh, that's what my point is. And then from there, they realize that they do an intro, right? Some people, they write the thing all the way through. They think they're writing linearly, but then they hit the conclusion, and their conclusion is actually their introduction, right? Everybody's a little bit different, right? So it's very important. This is important, too, for when choosing the best software or app for your research notebook. You have to really know yourself and know what kind of writer you are, and how your learning style and writing style would be best served by a certain software. Okay? And what would you need to use it mostly for? Do you need to use it mostly in class to take notes? How is it going to save you time? How is it going to save you money? How is it going to best serve that bridge between note-taking and writing these assignments? Okay? You have to pay, it's worth spending some time investing and reflecting on your own style and your own approach to this, right? You don't want to just like be doing it just because this is the assignment, this is the way it has to be done, right?
Yeah.
You really need to pay attention to yourself as an individual. So, because Garfield asked for this, let's go back for a second to the...
I'm going to email you now for this, all the other stuff.
For this thing?
No, all the worksheets that you were using that we didn't have.
Oh, the big package?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one that we didn't get.
Yeah, because it would have been like 15, 16 pages. Okay. Critical reading and a research notebook. Here we go. All right. Let me see if this will be important for you. This is about critical reading strategies. I think you guys are pretty okay with the critical reading part of it. It's the actual writing. So let's skip that.
What's this?
Keeping a research notebook. Here we go. So these are some ways you might want to organize your research notebook. You know, based on, and this is a very limited list, okay? But it's stuff that you should, like when I was keeping a research notebook when I was in grad school, I would do it, this was before these programs became more available. I was just using a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and I was just taking notes in that, because that gives you like the categories, so you can, and then you can alphabetize really quickly. And so if I'm looking for something that had to do with, I don't know, throw out a topic. Give me a topic, you guys.
What you mean topic? Donald.
Donald, right? Let's say I was researching, you know, Donald's impact on the arts. This would happen way before he was president, but let's say that was like something I was researching. Then I might like key in like Donald and the arts. You know, I would just do these categories. So for me that was easier because I could just click on it and it would alphabetize and all those things would come up under it. That was like pretty crude and rudimentary, but it was what I had at the time, right? So, and again, I'm not putting down like, you know, Forrest likes to use Word. Use what you're comfortable with, because you know what? That learning curve will eat up some time, right? And if you don't really have that time, and you're very proficient at something that, you know, works for you and is more old school, then use that, you know? The thing is, the only thing is if it's old school and involves actually like handwriting, you should probably, you know, scan it or figure out a way to digitize it, because it makes life easier, okay? So, so your notebook can be arranged according to lexicon, so your discipline's specific definitions, jargon, terminology. Here's a good way, when you're reading, this is part of the bridge between critical reading and critical writing. As you're digesting this information, you might want to, when you're taking notes, just restate what these terms mean or what these concepts mean in your own words, okay? You still probably want to cite the source of this, but you want to paraphrase it. You want to describe it in your own words. That's helpful for a lot of different things. It contributes towards your not just processing and internalizing this information, but also like here's something that you know, under a lot of grad students are under the impression that when they read something, they're under this obligation they have to understand what it means. But sometimes we read a writer, we have no idea what the heck we just wrote, right? And it's not cheating if, for instance, you read somebody's interpretation of what this person said, right? Because what the interpretation might be easier for you to understand than the actual thing. The actual original thing might be really dense.
Right. Written in Shakespeare or something.
Really, yeah, roses are red. Really boring, right? And you might go to somebody who did an interpretation of this, a paraphrase of this, and like, okay, this is what, it's not cheating to do that, right? So getting to this habit of kind of paraphrasing certain ideas helps them to make them your own. You just have to be careful that you don't unintentionally plagiarize, okay? Is everybody clear on that? Yeah, okay, good. I mean, again, depending on what kind of research you're doing, things like author information might be a useful way to organize your research notebook. And you know, this is pretty self-explanatory. You can organize that by biographical information or each author's important works. This is probably going to be like more important than even this, okay? And these two actually are pretty important, okay? So again, these are just possible ways to organize your research notebook. You can organize them by trends or historical events or certain movements or, for instance, Min, what you're working on is, that's definitely about, it's a historical transition, right? A power transition from municipality to state, right? So, tied to that are important dates like the Depression. Maybe you're doing research where the Depression, the Great Depression comes up for another reason. So you might want to organize your notebook depending on your project under, you know, the Great Depression or change of power from municipality to state, right? You don't know what the project could call for, but that's just one way of organizing it, right? Trends, current problems, proposed solutions. These are all possible ways to organize your notebook. Works list. This is for, I think, more for when you get into like the bibliography and I don't know.
Wordsmith?
Yeah, the works list.
Oh, works list, oh.
The works list might be better for, this is good for a bibliography or for a literature review section. Again, it depends on what the purpose of your specific assignment is.
Well,
Again, I would look for maybe a program or an app that might.
Cite This For Me. It used to be Ref Me. It's called Cite This For Me. You can log in and
Yes.
create your own thing for free. It does APA, MPA, Chicago, all of that stuff, and you can have a running list of bibliographies that you can just extract whatever you want right away and just paste in and do
And I
things.
think RefWorks does something similar too, again.
RefWorks? I thought Ref Me sold off to what's the other company again? You educators use it all the time for books, but they sold off to them and it's called now Cite This For Me.
I don't know, to be honest, but let's just check something here.
RefWorks? All right, okay, check it out. Yeah,
RefWorks Rutgers.
yeah, you guys, I didn't know they have RefWorks records.
Yeah, I mentioned it before, actually. Here we go. Yeah. Okay, what is RefWorks? And this is in one of the handouts, but I didn't give you that handout because you can go online and see. And I mean, and like I said before, you guys are Rutgers students, so you can get an account very easily. So it's Citation Manager. This is not so much for organizing your notebook as much as once your notebook is organized and you have, the authors and the articles or the book chapters or whatever the literature is. This is more helpful for when you want to actually start doing the works cited list or the bibliographies, the citations. So I would check this out. Look, if you use EndNote or Zotero, you can import records into this. There's style sheets, etc. I would make this a part of your exploration of what
Bookmarks.
programs to use for your notebook. Yeah, full text citations. There's like a bunch of stuff here that's useful.
All right, thanks for turning me on.
Okay, so let's go back to. Okay. Here we go, ideas list. I like this. This is a good, some good possible ins to organize your notebook. You can organize it or keep note of provocative questions that arise in class, lecture, or discussion. Okay? Topics in your textbook that appear ripe for further explanation. That'll help you with the evaluation assessment for certain assignments or for other projects that you're working on. Issues that come up in your conversations with classmates, outlines of papers to write, a sheaf of small project sketches. Yeah, I don't remember what this is referring to, so what was this referring to?
Which one?
This one.
A sheaf of small project sketches.
I didn't write this part, so I
One
can't remember
or
what
two
this is
pages
referring
of
to.
formality, presented ideas on a single subject. Oh, like a brainstorming? So you have an idea what you're
Yeah, I
gonna
think
do?
this is probably referring to brainstorm, so the notebook is good for, if you can organize it for something like, I don't know if it was script, one of the ones that you guys mentioned, where you can, there's one of them, you can break it up by just brainstorming ideas, right? Brainstorming for future projects,
Okay.
or future papers, or future book ideas, or whatever it is, but you definitely wanna keep that in mind. What I was talking to Forrest about, he already published this article that showed up in a publication called The Voice, but it's a short article, and from that article he could expand it into a larger piece for some other publication, or maybe even for a paper for his class, right? Yours is not digital, but it's easy enough to scan it and then convert it into some kind of text format.
I have it in my computer.
Yeah, so it is in your
So it's
computer,
already-
so, I mean, that could be part of this notebook. Again, it's up to you how you want to organize it, and you guys did a lot of research in the beginning of class, and I think you've got a clue now, maybe which one that you would go for, if you were to pick a certain program. So, and this is a pretty obvious statement, research notebook can take many forms, different systems work for different people. e.g. spreadsheet or Scrivener, offline, spiral notebook, legal pads, bound. I think we're kind of beyond the point where most people would use like these paper versions, although you guys did a lot of writing on paper today, so it's still in play. And again, if you're the kind of person who you're old school and very visual, it might work for you to just like, tack up stuff on a board or on a wall or whatever. For that, you just have to make sure you don't lose stuff. Some people find it useful to write a monthly summary for easy reference. I don't know, some of this is like, it's just pretty obvious stuff. That's why I didn't really go over it in the beginning. Is this helping, Garfield? Yeah?
What I didn't understand was you already went through the first ones. All
Yeah,
that
I
other
did.
stuff is like, yeah,
Yeah.
I got that. The first ones is what I didn't get. Actual structure of a note and how people, I mean, we all have our ideas of how what we might
Right.
do to feel comfortable in what we do, but I rather adapt rather to best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So I know this is what the professionals do. This is how it's done, that you can consistently and efficiently, fast, get what you need to get, or store what you need to store.
Would you mind writing that when you write your post-workshop,
Okay.
Comments?
Okay.
Write that in there, best practices of being used for
Right.
keeping a research notebook, for instance. If you could make a note of that, because then I'll make sure to include something.
Okay,
related to
in
that.
the notes, okay, no problem. Good on
Yeah,
that.
just in the sheet that I gave you guys at the beginning.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I really come at it from the perspective of,
Steal my stuff again.
yes, there might be best practices, but I've worked with students long enough to know that each student is different, so their problems are gonna be a little bit different, and to try to adhere to best practices sometimes puts you under the kind of pressure that leads to like writer's block, or like feeling like you're not good enough or enough of an authority, or you should be doing it this way. I'm kind of like against that, because I do feel like it blocks people, right? And it kind of mystifies writing. And so I'm not that keen on best practices, but I could certainly include it for something, for a future iteration of this. Okay. So this is a reverse, this might be useful for some of you, this reverse outline. As far as taking notes after you've read something, it's a reverse outline. So a reverse outline, when you're about to write something, you outline before you write it. It's a way to organize your ideas. A reverse outline is when you've already read another text and you just are basically outlining what you've already read. Okay, so these are some steps to writing a reverse outline. Excuse me. So a reverse outline works in the other direction. Is an outline which is created from the text. Right? It's not an outline as a prelude to writing a text. It is a way to strategically break down a piece of writing and discover an author's central argument and the ways that he or she supports that argument. I don't know how useful this is for you guys. You seem like you're kind of already beyond this. Am I right or wrong about that? I mean, but if there's anything here, some students are not.
I'll work with it. All right, listen, I'll take whatever you give me.
So basically, it's steps to writing a reversed outline.
Learn from it.
Right, you want to be taking notes on this. What is the reading about and how do I understand it? Okay, you could actually, would be useful, you can actually apply this to your own writing, or even better, if you're doing peer work. Let's say you're working in a study group, or you have peer work in class, right? And you're evaluating somebody else's work, okay? And they maybe have certain issues. And this, if you're able to recognize issues in other people, you might then be able to transfer that to your own writing. So, so what is the reading about, whatever the reading is, and how do I understand it? Get an idea of what the essay is about and reflect on your initial understanding of the piece. So again, if you're taking it in sections like the lit review, or like the section that you were working on, what is this about and how does this relate to my main idea? Or how does this relate to my main thesis or my main purpose for writing this, okay? So sometimes it's helpful to actually take notes on stuff that you've already written, to write a reflection on it. I don't know, to be honest, if you're gonna have time to to do this. Ideally, it would be great, but some people might. You want to like maybe look at it in segments. What is the role of each paragraph? Identify each paragraph section and provide a brief analysis of each. Consider the following questions. What is the main purpose of the paragraph or section? What is the writer hoping to accomplish? The writer could be you, like I said. What does the writer do to try to get his or her point across in the paragraph or section? Does he or she include facts or expert opinions, try to manipulate your emotions, make comparisons, etc.? Does the author achieve his or her intended purpose in that section? How does the paragraph or section function in the argument the author is making? And this is stuff I talked about in the beginning, patterns, look for patterns. So patterns are about organization. So how is the thing organized? Really for you guys, I would say in terms of the organization of your own writing, and you can also look at this in terms of the writing you're reading, articles, etc. What patterns do you see? Is it, and by patterns, it's not just deficits. Like what patterns of strength do you see? What deficits do you see? Is there like a consistent issue? Like for instance, when I went through with each of you individual, I heard certain patterns in your writing. I saw certain patterns, but I also heard certain patterns. And from hearing what you read, I was able to identify, okay, you need to make your position clearer. You need to include more of, transitions and like why you're writing this. What did I say for you, Forrest? You need to include what?
I forget now. I got it back here somewhere.
Oh yeah, you need to just like stay focused on what you know, what you can argue, and not pretend like you can talk about stuff you really don't know much about yet. Like you want to acknowledge that, okay? And Garfield, I forgot what I said about you, but I know I identified something for each of you. So looking for patterns and being aware of your patterns both in yourself and others' writing is always a good thing. And why is this important? Because if you're writing critiques and evaluations of these other people, you're going to probably encounter these same people over and over again. Because they kind of lay the foundation of certain theories or certain body of work in your field, right? So you're going to know what their strengths and their weaknesses are, and you're going to be able to detect certain patterns in their writing. So it's good to be aware of that, and it's also good to be aware of that in your own. How's that, Garfield? Did I cover enough stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good.
So some of this was stuff I had already talked about in the beginning, and some of it, is pretty obvious. But if any of you do want this, just email me and I'll send you a copy.
I just emailed you already.
Oh,
Quick question.
yeah.
You have experienced other writers too. What are some of the advices you have for people who are challenged with a writer's block at times?
It depends on what the cause of the writer's block is. So if you're talking about yourself, like what causes you writer's block?
Well, you and I kind of have something similar we talked about.
And so tell me what we talked
Hyper.
about.
We're hyper focused with some of the things.
We can hyper focus
And then we
because.
procrastinate to the last minute and just like,
Do you have ADD?
no, not that I checked. Trust me. Sometimes I think I focus too hard on things.
Or
Too intense on some things.
do you also, or if you don't have that, because I do, I have mild ADD, so I'm like always, I tend to like ping and be like thinking of a lot of things at the same time.
Well, I do that. That I do.
Okay.
I think
So,
all over the place.
So if you're that kind of person where you're like, you're pinging, I call it pinging, and thinking about multiple things at once. And my problem was that I would be thinking about so many things at once, I would never be able to finish one thing. I would start a lot of things, but never be able to follow through and finish them unless I hyper-focused. And then I would end up sitting down for like 6 or 8 hours and being totally wiped out by the end, right?
I do that sometimes.
So what started to work for me is instead of resisting that, and instead of trying to do what other people were doing, I just worked with that way of thinking. I started working on multiple projects at the same time. And when I regardless of what I might be doing, if I got an inspiration or I got the idea, a trigger that sent me to work on a specific project, I learned to drop what I was doing, if at all possible, and go and work on that project, okay?
Learn to prioritize them.
Yeah, I developed my own sense of priorities, definitely. That's very important, instead of trying to do it all, trying to do it in a certain way that I was supposed to be doing it. I just decided that's not how I operate. I'm gonna operate in my own style.
Did you find that group work helped you better?
Yes. That was my next thing. The thing I was gonna say after that was what really started to help me was going to things like conferences and sitting on panels and just getting involved with more groups to play off ideas.
I'm talking about groups in the form of study groups.
Yeah, that would fall under that same category for me, yeah.
Because some of the classes, I can't find, I mean, I think maybe there are one or two, but they're usually like from class to home. I can't find any true study buddies or any people who are like focused like.
You might have to organize your own, or, you know, if it's that important to you, you know, maybe not wait for one to appear, but actually
Set one up.
set one up, yeah.
Well, I guess we can start a study group. Are you in a study group?
Study
Are
group.
you in a study group? It's Friday when she's no.
I mean, if you guys come to tomorrow's presentation, I'm not doing tomorrow's, but
I'm coming tomorrow.
you don't know. Like, definitely take advantage of things like this too. You don't know. Do I need to go over anything in citation, attribution, formatting? It didn't seem like this was a big issue for this group. No?
No.
No, okay. Yeah, that's never been my favorite topic, and there's like so many resources online. Let's see what we have here. Revision and editing, we've kind of been doing that. Let's just go over this real quickly, these points. So we worked on drafts today in two different kinds of drafts. A draft from, beginning draft, and then when we looked at your own individual writing, it was already a draft in progress. So it was a later draft. Okay, so let's look at some of these points related to revision. Revision is very different than editing or proofreading. Editing and proofreading is the thing that you should do last. Should not be doing editing and proofreading while you're drafting, because that could cause writer's block, okay? So when I was coming around and peering over your shoulder, because it was not my writing, it was writing somebody else had done, like the editor in me was kicking in, I was restraining from making too many comments, right? Same thing for you, when you're drafting, resist the urge to make it be perfect. You just want to produce at that point, okay? So producing, drafting will give you something that you can then revise, and then when you have revised and you have a finished draft, finished in quotes, then you can edit and proofread, okay? So revision incorporates changes to an essay that reflect new thinking or conceptualizing. I think that's pretty obvious what that means. You do the first draft, you get some new ideas as your research deepens, etc., and you add in more information. So basically, for instance, Forrest, what you're going to be doing with the article you already published is you're going to be revising it and expanding it, right? And what we talked about for the rest of you, adding in some things related to your patterns, that's a form of revision, okay? You want to focus on the strength of your ideas during revision, the organization of the content, and the appropriateness of the evidence incorporated. Editing, I just said this, editing and proofreading are the final stages. They're just the polishing part of it. And it's exclusively for style and presentation. So, like grammar stuff, punctuation stuff, etc. Okay, so let's just briefly go over this, just important points of this. When you're revising, you want to keep in mind this: has the assignment been met? Okay, is the argument or issue clearly presented and has a working thesis been established? Who is the audience? Have you kept your audience in mind all the way through? Okay, so for each section of this, the introduction, the literature review, the methodology, the conclusion, I think the most important of these is, has the argument or issue been clearly presented? And is your writing all the way through in those sections in support of that purpose that you're writing for, okay? So that brings us down to these questions. Are the questions and issues that motivate the writer, that would be you, clear? Has the writer effectively related the conversation that published writers are engaged in? I actually don't know what that means. Again, I didn't write this part, I just adapted it, but I actually don't know what that means. So let's like skip that. What is the writer's thesis? So again, that's basically what I just said. All the way through, is your thesis, is the reason why you're writing this, is your purpose made clear all the way through? Sometimes it's not made clear because, you know, as we've seen, there are some situations where you're listing a lot of information, but, you know, what's connecting this information? And the thing that's connecting it, those transitions or those other things that are the things that are relating back to what the thesis is. Again, as part of revision, you want to also diagnose what passages of the draft are most effective, as well as those that are least effective. So if something is really working and is really strong, you want to be able to diagnose why it's strong. It's probably exhibiting some of these things that we talked about, right? It's got a clear sense of its purpose, it's got good transitions, it's got, you know, whatever. Because most times we tend to focus on what's not working, but you also want to focus on what is working and try to replicate that or make that consistent throughout, okay? So for instance, each of you give me an idea of what was working in your writing sample, either from this morning or in the individual sample that you just showed me. What is working? What is strong about your writing?
They have a saying that says self-praise is no recommendation. I came into this class without any expectations. I came in like a blank sheet trying to absorb whatever I can because I saw this as an opportunity to get my writing or my research skills on the graduate level. So to say what's working, I mean, yeah, I'm passing classes, you know, but I won't come out and say, oh, that's working, I'm strong in that. I mean, I'm still learning.
Yeah, okay, I see your point, but I'm trying to make a different point, that's why I'm asking. If it would help, you can reread something from your writing to me again, and I can tell you what's working.
Okay.
If you don't recognize it, I can tell you what's working.
Okay. I'll do that. Here I go again. From the one that I wrote out earlier, and we said we analyzed it and we tested it out.
Okay.
There we go. This is what it says. Oh wow, that's my one. Why are you bringing up this one? Scrivener. Okay, here we go. This is what we wrote. 500 pages per week is required reading for the SPA undergraduate. For a SPA undergraduate at Rutgers Newark. And this is minimal compared to many graduate students' reading loads. Efficient students don't, or rather do not practice to do readovers. Accordingly, the taking of notes saves time from rereading the coursework.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Sure.
So, class, what's working? What's strong about those 4 sentences? What do you like? What's making an impact on you?
Students need the digital noting.
Well, you like the transitional words?
To me, that shows like an awareness of and a consideration for the audience and an awareness of the purpose for why you're writing that. Okay. Now that's something that not everybody has. Okay, that's something that some people struggle with. So those 2 things are definitely strengths, right? There's definitely an awareness of audience, and there's definitely an awareness of the purpose of why you're writing. things like, you know, the transitions, in the scheme of things, they're not like the top, the highest level, problems, right? They're kind of somewhere in the
So
middle.
they're mainly like the indicators when one is driving, so you could alert the individual, I'm gonna make a turn here,
Yeah,
I'm gonna make a
that's
right here,
that's
I'm
a
braking
great,
here.
that's a great analogy, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so you know that you have an engaging style. That's a very engaging style to me. It's like, oh, I like this person's writing. That there's a style to it that I really like. Now, for each of you, when you were reading, there was something that I picked up that's like, oh, yeah, I really like that. Go ahead, read, if you want to read from the same software thing or from something else, read to me.
Okay. Digital note tools become more and more popular today because they provide a mobile working flat for students and professionals to take notes, organize information, and edit context. Digital note tools free you from a bunch of heavy, hard notebooks from class to class.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. To me, that's like a clear, authoritative, like objective kind of style. You know, it's kind of like, I'm the boss and I know what I'm talking about, and you know what, that comes across to me, and that's something that some people don't know how to do, okay, but that's a strength that you have, okay, so this is why it's important to recognize your strengths as well. Read me something. Well, either one of you can go, whichever, find something first.
I'll just read this morning.
Yeah.
An essential component of any graduate study program is the writing of academic papers involving extensive research and analysis to convey new and useful information in the student's chosen field.
Keep going.
There are many software programs available to assist the researcher in his or her quest to identify, organize, and manage the writing process. 3 of those software programs are Scrivener, Scrapple, and Document.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. See, to me, that's pretty clear, direct, not a lot of BS. It just gets to it, right? And when I noticed that in your sample from your class, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of useful information, and that's really good. So you know that you can provide information really well. The trick is just to connect it to the reason why you're providing it, okay? But again, all 3 of you have very different styles, right? Go ahead.
Okay, therefore I would recommend using OneNote based upon the presentation made by Garfield and over 25 years of experience with Microsoft Office. I'm going to make my paper using Microsoft Word, which I have used from Windows 3.1 to the present. Word has gone through many manifestations since the beginning, and its templates are good for these purposes.
Okay, so in your case, it's yours is also pretty clear. You have a sense of what you know, right? And you can make an argument based on what you know. Okay, so you have, that's a good sense to have, a sense of that's a form of having authority in your writing as well. Okay, so it's important to pat yourself on the back a little bit, not just, this is what I need to work on. Okay, I want to look a little bit at, do I have it here with me? Oops. All right. Bootcamp. Abstracts and book reviews. Do you guys want to do abstracts and book reviews or conferences and publishing? Because when I was putting this together, one of the things that I got from the feedback forms was, they're interested in applying for conferences and publishing, blah, 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 so.
Go. I'm glad. If I could learn all of them, I learned. So whatever you,
Right,
from what you've assessed, what we were doing, I'd go with that. What are we having? Okay.
Now, I like the conferences, I like doing this workshop, I did it in April. I like doing this workshop because to me, a lot of this is just common sense and practical, right? So, you know, you don't want to put writing in a different category from practical, real-life applications. And I think conferences, going to conferences, applying to conferences, writing abstracts for conferences is a good way not only to practice some of these writing skills, but also to give you experience in the field and to build your networks, right? So have any of you done conferences or sat on panels or published or anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so tell me a little bit about that.
I've sat on a couple of panels with attorneys. I have an associate's degree in paralegal studies. And as such, my old alma mater, ECC, some of the professors invite me sometimes in some functions, whether it be panel discussions regarding immigration, panel discussions regarding the new, some of the new presidential orders, executive orders that were released.
Right.
And I discussed, told them my point of view, of my experiences, my knowledge of it. It's structured. There's a mediator.
Did you actually have to write an abstract or a proposal?
I wrote a bio. I wrote
Okay.
a bio, and I wrote and submitted my resume also. As towards the abstract of what we're going to be talking about, no. The bio serves as to your background, and they'll say yeah or no to bring you in. I haven't actually written an abstract to say, well, this is what we're going to talk about.
Okay, so, yeah, if you're asked to be on a panel, sometimes it's, you know, a matter of just provide your bio and your credentials, and that's like probably the easiest way to get on a panel. But in terms of, you know, practicing your writing and expanding your professional networks, sometimes going to these things is a good way to kind of force yourself, you know, push you to do more writing or to do the kind of writing that will help you in your field. So it's not just, you're not just writing these papers for a class assignment, but you're actually writing it because you're contributing to you know, this panel or this workshop, and there's other people in your field listening to. So I'm a big proponent of being practical about this, and the reason why you're in your program is to not sit at home with your degree, right? But you're going to do something with it in the world, whether that means teaching or working for government or working in, you know, for business. You're gonna be out dealing with people. So I'm a big fan of, if you have the time, if you can figure out a way to incorporate this as part of your study, to apply to conferences, go to conferences, submit proposals to conferences, submit abstracts to conferences. I'm a big supporter of that. When I was in grad school, that one of our assignments was to write a proposal for an actual conference, and I believe some people actually got in. So this is related to the research notebook, because the research notebook is helping you to keep track of your ideas, and there's a section of the research notebook where you can organize for future projects. And one of the future projects could be, for instance, an article or a book idea or a conference panel idea, right? So if you have that information stored in a certain section of your research notebook, you can then access it to revise and adapt this existing paper or existing piece of writing to fit in with the panel topic. If you have never done that before, you could ask for guidance from an advisor. But I would definitely look into this. It's actually, I find it to be kind of fun to do this. So let's look at finding conferences, the common sense part of it. Join your discipline's professional organization or organizations. For example, for me, I'm a writer. I'm a member of AWP, Association of Writers and Writing Programs, and yes, I've gone to many of the conferences and sat on panels and presented on panels, etc. MLA, I was a member of that for a while, etc., and register online. I'm sure all of you in your programs have professional organizations. I would really encourage you to join them, okay? They're good for networking, they're good for professional contacts, they're good as outlets to get your projects into the world, okay? I would do things like attend grad school association meetings, gatherings, and network with other attendees, attend professional development events or meetings, submit work to student symposia to practice. A lot of grad programs have these symposiums. If yours does, submit something that you're working on. Submit something that you've gotten really good feedback on. See if you can do a presentation on that topic. You want to attend conferences and panels, especially those where professionals in your field that you've written about in lit reviews or bibliographies, et cetera, are presenting. Again, this is all tied back into your interest, because, I mean, why are you in the program that you're in? What do you eventually want to do with it?
I wanted to be involved in research and model development.
To do what with that?
Oh, I want to support companies to identify market opportunities and grow their business.
That totally sounds like a conference topic to me. I mean, that sounds like something I would, be interested in hearing about. So, you could modify an existing paper that you're working on and submit to something that would fit in with that, right? This is pretty, commonsensical, pretty obvious. What was the thing here that I
That's
wanted?
like applying for a job.
These things are good on your
Yeah.
CV too. If you get on a conference or you do, they're excellent for a job. So again, you don't want to just have this tunnel vision of, I have to do this assignment for this class. I have to learn this kind of writing to finish this assignment for this class. You want to be thinking broader, okay? I would get familiar also with journals in your field. These are journals that you might eventually submit to, or journals that are affiliated with conferences that you might want to attend, or where you'll meet people that you'll eventually network in, either for a job or for the name of the game really is about networking for whatever you want to do. Let me see, what was
Gotta be in
the,
it to win it. Well, you said law, it's at Washington.edu. But that's Georgetown, Washington? Which was Washington State?
where's that?
The third from top. Nursing science law.
You mean this one right here?
It's not
Down.
George, that's not
Law.
George Washington.
Law.
Yeah.
Let's see what this is from. Here we go, writing for
University
publishing and
of
law
Washington.
reviews, submitting manuscripts.
Gallagher Law Library, School of Law, University.
So that's Washington State, not DC.
Yeah, Washington State.
Yeah, this is state.
Hi. Okay, people. I'll let you know it's officially.
All of these resources are
24 hours.
are useful if you've written a paper, and it's a good match for a conference. All of these resources are good for tips about how you can turn that paper into a panel or a paper to present at a conference. Again, a lot of these conferences will then publish their proceedings,
Excuse me.
and they will publish your paper, so again, that's another credit.
Ooh, so I can have someone citing my work?
Mhm.
Ooh. And I'm not a doctor? I'm not a PhD?
Why not?
Cite my work.
This is pretty self-explanatory too. I would just, I think being in grad school is not just about, this is the takeaway, it's not just about doing your work and doing your assignments. It's also, like I said, it's broader than that. So really, you want to keep the networking aspect of it in mind. And how can the networking be a supplement to your writing and vice versa, okay? That's super important. So,
So, right, networking is key. A lot of people have graduated from school and it wasn't the interview that got them anywhere. It was someone who they networked and knew, like, hey, come aboard, I got a
Right.
job for you. And boom, like, huh?
But this is the most difficult part for me.
Oh, okay.
what, the networking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk.
That's why-
Talk to me. And
I don't know any topics. I don't know any topics to talk about.
Oh, you got plenty of topics to just
Really?
about, just what I read. You got topics to talk
Break
about.
the ice. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Good.
Okay. You guys want to wrap up with abstracts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, is this included in your handout, the abstracts one?
I don't believe so. Let's see.
But I think there is a link to all these materials in the email by Bonnie.
Okay, good. If there's not, if there's something that's missing, you can always email me
Oh, I think
directly
so.
and say,
Yes,
could you
it is.
send me,
We have an
could you
abstract?
send me this thing?
No, it says OWL and the One American EDU, and those links. Are those the ones?
Evaluating research topic proposals and annotated bibliography abstracts? Yes, it is. We have it. As we proceed.
Okay, so we began today talking about structure. And things like abstracts and book reviews are they're a good way to look at structure. And I just think they're a fun way to look at structure because they're smaller. And they're short and sweet because if they're done well, they're very useful and it's not a lot of information, but it still gives you a sense of the organization. So generally, a good abstract should be short and substantive, be academic clickbait, right? So what does that mean? This is something one of my students came up with. So as you're doing research, you were looking for abstracts that are going to catch your attention and be really useful for you and what you're working on, right? And you want your abstract to do the same thing for somebody else, okay? So you that's what you're aiming for. I want my abstract to be academic clickbait. So it should also provide either information or a thumbnail or the overall work. And the thumbnail of the overall work includes the thesis, methodology, and the findings overview. I talked about this a little bit before. Adhere to the publisher's or submission entity's requirements in format and word length, which can vary from 100 to 500. As I said before, most abstracts that I've encountered in journals are in like the 200 to 300 word range. It's unusual to have something be 100, like super short or super long for the 500. Proper citation format, that's pretty obvious. Void first person. I might have to revisit that one, that really depends, but most of them are not written in first person, and we're gonna see some examples, okay? This is definitely the case, and I mentioned this before, it should be written in active voice. So the researchers tested, that's active voice, versus the subject, that should be, that's a typo, it should be subjects. The subjects were tested by researchers. You see the difference? Passive voice, it slows down the pace and it's wordier. The researchers tested instead of the subjects were tested by researchers. It should include keywords and it should use the same language as the larger work. Okay, that's important. So here's some kinds of abstracts: critical, descriptive, informative, and highlight. Of the 4 of these, the highlight one is the one that you're probably never going to see in academic writing, because that's more like an advertisement. It's just kind of like, you know, it's a promotion. It's not really, it's really designed to capture attention. It's not really necessarily presenting any kind of useful information. I've never encountered this in academic writing. So that leaves us 3 that you're going to be dealing with mostly in academic writing. So you have critical, descriptive, or informative. Critical describes, do you have a question?
No, I was reading this.
Okay.
Sorry.
Critical describes main findings and evaluates them in relation to other works on the same or related topic. This is usually closer to 500 words because of added evaluation, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about what these are, and then we're going to have some sample abstracts. We're going to read through them, and then we're going to talk about what kind they are and why, okay? So you have descriptive abstracts, which briefly summarize or describe what the work is about without results or evaluation. It includes purpose, methods, and scope, normally short, 100 to 150. I gotta say that most abstracts you're gonna see are gonna be kind of combinations of these things, okay? Then we have an informative one. Most common abstract. Snapshot of work includes main arguments, results, conclusions, and possibly recommendations. Mid-length, about 300 words. Like, this is by far the one you're gonna see the most of. Okay. So let's take a look at these sample abstracts. This one's pretty short. Let's read this first one, and then we'll talk about what kind it is and why. So I have included some from different fields. I've included humanities and social science and then hard science. We're not gonna read every single one of them, but we're gonna read a few of them. So let's read this humanities one first.
Commemoration and
Yeah, that one, the commemoration and memorialization of the American Revolution.
Right, Benjamin Herman and John Lee, Mentor
Yeah.
History. This project involves discovering how the American Revolution was remembered. during
Yeah,
the
read
main-
it to yourselves.
Oh, okay. We're supposed to identify the type after we read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Identify what kind they are. It could be a combination of a couple or more than a couple. Okay, so what do you guys think?
I mean,
Critical, descriptive, or informative?
Descriptive.
Both descriptive and informative.
Okay, why?
Because it tells, it goes on to the conclusion of how it shaped the American Revolution, as well as describing what how they did it.
Mm-hmm. And anybody else?
I kind of got threw off when it said the highlight. That word used in highlight.
You think it's a highlight one?
It said something regarding highlight. Hold on, it says right here. This research highlights the importance of the revolution in shaping the action of the United States government. I know the wording,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, and even though you said it's rarely used, but I know it's more than that, it's not an ad. So, but that wording kind of threw me off there. I go with him regarding the hybrid type that it is. It's descriptive. I wouldn't say critical because it's less than 500 words, and I'd say it's descriptive and informative.
Well, also, it's not just the word count, but what makes it critical is that it evaluates the topic in relation to other works.
Okay,
So
so it's
is-
doing a comparison?
Yeah, so is that going on to any extent here?
Yeah.
Where?
What, in the one we just read?
Yeah, because I'm hearing a no and I'm hearing a yes. Why a no first?
It's not comparing it to other things.
What do you think, Garfield? Is it,
Okay, hold on. Oh, it is because they're comparing the Supreme Court cases. They're comparing, right here, it's comparing, examining events such as the Supreme Court cases of John Marshall and the nullification crisis.
I think it's still a description. It is describe what the authors did, other than the reviewers' comments or something like that. So it's a describe.
it's because it's describing cases that happen, it's not evaluating in reference to another work or another theory about this, right? So,
That's their method. It's part of their methodology.
I tend to think that this is mostly, if not all, descriptive. It's, because what's it really evaluating here? It's describing what happened in these situations, but what's it really evaluating? right? Even this research highlights the importance of the revolution in shaping the actions of the United States government. It's not necessarily presenting a critique, it's just describing what, you know, right, so.
Well, it did make a sense, it says, after evaluating the nullification crisis in John Marshall's cases, it becomes clear that John Marshall and John Calhoun attempted to use the American Revolution to bolster their claims of citing speeches from founding.
That's, I mean, it's possible that there's a little bit of an argument buried there, sure. It could be. I'm not saying that that's not there. To me, this seems mostly descriptive. It's arguable whether there's also a little bit of critical in there. It's possible, for sure.
Okay. I know some things, some abstracts are not just cut in stone because there's gonna be some leeway, hybrid.
But the thing is, would an abstract like this be useful?
As a
To you.
researcher?
No, it doesn't matter whether or not you're in this field. Do you find that the way this is presented is done in a useful way, that it conveys useful information?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
It tells you about the American Revolution. It tells you how the context of how it was viewed in the 19th century compared to what it is now. And it tells you what the goal is.
How about for other people? Is this useful?
I mean, if they just want to know information, I mean, I'm into law, so yeah, it's useful to me.
Mhm.
Unless they just want to know about John Marshall, or they want to know about the American Revolution, yeah, it is. It has some.
Or if you want to know about the nullification crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, again, this is transferring it to your writing, and to when you're writing an abstract. And it doesn't really even matter if it's just an abstract or the whole thing, because an abstract is a snapshot of the whole thing. How is this useful for other people? How is this useful for people in my field? How is this useful for people in interrelated fields, okay? So, let's look at something else here. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at this one on autism. Let's go through this one and see if we can identify stuff in this. Also, is this useful?
Which one is this?
So the
Next
subtype
one.
of autism,
Social science abstracts?
yes.
Informative. Nice.
Informative is snapshot of work, includes main arguments, results, conclusions, and possibly recommendations. And it seems like this includes a little bit of the methodology too.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. This is a good one because the structure is fairly clear in this, yes? So, you know what, think of your papers in terms of this. If abstracts are a snapshot of your paper, in a way, I encourage this, some people to do this. Write an abstract of your paper even before it's written, right? Because it gives you it's in a way it sort of outlines, but in paragraph form, the whole thing. And something like this could be very useful because, look, it includes the purpose, right? It includes a definition of something, of a specific term,
Wish it was descriptive.
right?
Informative,
So purpose,
purpose, definition.
definition of a key, a problem they're working with.
But it doesn't give
or
methods.
identification.
It
So it's
doesn't-
actually not a definition, it's an identification of a key problem they're working with. Methodology, right?
First phase.
The method is here, the first
Mhm.
phase.
So there is some descriptive, like it's a hybrid then, it's informative and descriptive then.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. There's a lot of informative here, but look, I mean, this is one of my favorite ones because, and then here's their findings too, right?
Right,
Findings here, and then recommendations.
so say hybrid then.
So this one's got it all.
Are you saying it has critical also there? No,
It's not really,
in the context of 500 words.
yeah, it's not really, well, it is sort of evaluating, right? Because this is what they're evaluating. By identifying DBD as a subtype of autism, we will eliminate the assumption that all autistics have the same characteristics.
Right.
So they are doing something in relation to other work. Okay, so the structure of this is very clear to me. Okay, and this one too is, this one's got a structure too, this hard science one on SIB. So let's take a look at this one. Okay, so what about this one?
Critical.
Talk to me about the structure of it too. Where do you see the different, components of this doing?
They have findings and they have a description of what is meaning to this field.
Right, so here they have background information to set, and again, this mimics something that, for instance, goes on in an introduction. That's where you give background information, right? The background information is then in support of the main focus. Here's the main focus, right? Right here. Right there. I mean, actually, it goes even further than that. This one's a little bit different than the previous one, but the structure of it is still very clear here. Or am I wrong? Am I wrong here? I mean, to me, this seems like it's got a pretty obvious structure. That's why it's good to look at well-written abstracts for structure. Again, try that. Try writing an abstract of your paper, before it's finished, or what you imagine you would want the abstract to, imagine. Write an abstract because that's kind of a snapshot of like your ideal version of the paper, okay? It's like a mini outline in paragraph form, okay? I'm a big fan of structure because then if you have the structure down, then things like how to incorporate your voice and how to incorporate things like transitions, it's easier to do within a framework instead of just, having it be all over the place, okay? Another good thing to look at in terms of structure is to read reviews, okay? Read a good review of a book review, a movie review. It doesn't have to be something in your field, but like start getting tuned to this idea of structure, right? A good review will, let me go up to this. I mean, a big thing is always organization, right? The purpose of a review is to critically evaluate, not just inform readers about it. And that's basically what you're doing in your academic papers, right? All of these things are interrelated. So I'm a fan of looking at different kinds of writing and not just, like, for instance, using abstracts or book reviews to to help you write your own thing, but actually look at the structure of them and start to see which ones are better written than others and for what reason. Because it's like pretty obvious in the two abstracts we just saw, it's pretty obvious where the structure is, right? Are we wrapping up at 4:30 or at 5? I forgot.
At 4.
4.
Oh, at 4.
At 4, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 4:30.
No, it was 4. I was wondering, like, you want to stay? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys, I kept you longer.
Yeah.
Okay, final questions though, before we wrap it up. If you want any of these handouts, just email me.
Actually, if you email them to me, I'll post them on our site.
Perfect,
Thank
perfect.
you.
So do that. So they'll be in touch with you or just go to the library site.
So just send them to me, and then I'll send you guys another email.
I'll plug
with
it,
the
okay.
link to boot camp.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll send you the whole compiled thing. It might take like a couple of days though, because I have to organize it. Final questions. Are you guys all planning on attending tomorrow's?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so for tomorrow's, bring in samples, writing samples again. I don't know how Simone is going to approach this, but you might have more time to work on your individual samples. My workshops are always kind of like the groundwork ones, and hers are more PhD oriented, so there might be other things that she covers that I didn't. Okay,
Okay.
thank you so much. It was a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.